I'm Brittany with Stitches of Love Quilting, and welcome to the Sewing Machine Applique tutorial for block 2 of your Christmas Lane Block of the Month quilt. So in this video tutorial specifically, I'm going to show you how to build your 3 ornament applique units, and then you're going to put that on your background fabric, and I'll talk a little bit about some stitch tips. So what you want to do, of course, is open your kit, press your background fabric, prepare your applique units. What I like to do is use the pattern, and I'll use my placement guide to the side, and I'll put my entire pile of pieces in numerical order. So for example, our first applique unit that we're going to build is 1 through 8, and so I have a little pile in numerical order of 1 through 8, and then 9 through 14 for our second pile, and 15 through 27 for the third applique unit. So what we're gonna do is get started. Let me come down here to the pattern for you. I am going to move where I have just my applique placement guide, and we're gonna start building our first unit. So I'm gonna take my placement guide, put it underneath my pressing sheet, which I have on top of my glass mat and on top of my light pad. I'll turn these on and we're ready to begin building our applique unit. So the first one is our pink little ornament, and we start with number 1. So we simply put our pieces in place, and in only a few minutes you're gonna have your applique units built, ready to go onto your background fabric, and then you're gonna be ready to sew. It's pretty great having pre-fused laser cut applique pieces because it definitely speeds up the applique process. And I think I have the wrong piece right there. I sure do. There we go. When you make your little pile, make sure to check your placement guide that you have the right piece. So I'm going to give these a little press where they overlap for just a second, just long enough for them to stick so that I can lift it. And now we have our ornament. This happens to be a perfect circle, so you can turn it however you think the fabric looks cute. I'm just gonna do it where it's sort of straight, I guess. A little bit OCD of me, I would say. And give that a press there. Now we're gonna put our 3 stripes on, and I'm gonna lift this just a second to make sure I put my stripe exactly where it goes. And you can see through your placement guide, but it's still a good idea to give it a little bit of a check. There we go. And give this a press. Now we have a shorter one at the top as well. And this one's easy to get in place because the edges match perfectly on the edge. See, when it's in place, it's smooth on the edge here and here. So give that a quick press, and now we have our center stripe. It's the same. You know you have it in the right spot when it's perfectly smooth on both edges. Nice, huh? This piece right here isn't because it doesn't go all the way to the edge because it's overlapped on, right? So now the only piece left to put in place is our little accent right here. And there's 2 pieces of the white. You'll notice that throughout this entire project, and that's because, see, it's not super white when it's on top of such bold colors like red and pink and things like that. But by double lining it, by adding a second piece directly on top, you get a much more clear white look without so much of that background showing through. Now, of course, I have my light pad on, so you see it more when I turn it off. You can see it disappears. Pretty cool. Now we're gonna move where we're gonna build our second applique unit. So you don't have to lift this unit off, you're just gonna move where you have space to work over here. And we are going to build our yellow ornament. So let me just pick up my pieces and put it over here, easy to reach. So we're gonna put our first piece in place. There we go. And then the little hook of our ornament. There we go. Those are always the ones like getting it onto the tree is a challenge for a second. There we go. I think my sleeve hit some pieces. They're sticking to me. And then put this in place. And we're going to give this a press where it overlaps. And then this is easy to put in place because you have a 90-degree angle right here that goes right at the edge. This is ultimately going to be the very edge of your piece. So when you trim, it's going to be really helpful because this actually is going to go in to your seam allowance. And now we have our little zigzag. We'll put right in place. Oh, he goes this way, doesn't he? He sure does. I had him upside down. Or do I have him upside down? Let's lift. Let's make sure, because I can't quite see through my print. Just like so, right about here. There we go. That's making sense. You can always, so you see how I just lifted my piece? You can always do that. That's the beauty of the fusing mat. It doesn't hurt your applique piece at all to gently peel up a piece and take a look at what's going on underneath. So you know you have it in the right place when, again, smooth on the edge, smooth on the edge. I love it. Give it a press. And again, I'm not pressing it all the way. I'm just pressing enough so that it sticks. And then we're going to come right here and put this little guy in place right there. And again, we have 2 of the white pieces. And the second one goes right on top, easy peasy. There we go. And now we are already building our 3rd unit. Is this not flying by? Such a nice, quick, fun process when you have the laser cut pieces, because as soon as you get these units built and onto your fabric, it's time to start sewing, and that's the fun part. And really, this one is a really quick sew this month. You have some months, obviously, where there's a lot more pieces. They're smaller, they're more detailed. But this is a really nice one. I like that it falls at only your 2nd month. So you get some good practice if you're new to applique. I love, we have so many of you telling us that you're new to applique. I mean, once you do applique, it's way more fun than piecing. To me, at least. I love it. And we will iron where this overlaps. Now we're going to put our big circle, and it's a perfect circle. And yes, it's going to go into the seam allowance on this left side, and on the bottom, when you sew your block together, the seam is going to come right up to it, but not quite into the seam allowance. And now we're going to put all of our little circles on. So the 2 pieces I'm going to do first are my little small guys on the edge. So I have a little small guy right over here. I'm going to put those in place first because I think it makes a little sense to get those out of the way, because the rest of them are just big circles. And one right here. Again, the edge is going to be a perfect fit. There we go. And in reality, since you're doing sewing machine applique, you could put these little circles anywhere you wanted. I am going to look at my placement guide through it though and put them in place quickly. This kind of reminds me of little pepperonis. Doesn't it kind of look like little pepperonis? Let's see, is that the spot? Yep, right there. And one more little guy right here. So I have all those in place. I'm just gonna put my iron over all of them at one time. And now it is time for right here, the white. Ooh, there we go. And you wanna be careful when you have a really long piece like this, just to make sure I tell you, when you're stitching, you're gonna wanna really take your stitch length down to a small size when you're stitching this, because you don't wanna just shred that point, but I'll mention that again in a moment when we talk about stitching. And get this right over the other one. There we go. All right, so now we have all 3 units built. We are going to set these aside. Let's take our units, just gently pull that up. That's my 2nd unit, my 3rd unit, and my 1st unit. And to see how easy these just come right off. You want to be gentle, right? Because, you know, be gentle with your project. But it's a sturdy guide. So I'm going to set my fusing mat aside, and I'm just going to take my background fabric, plop it right on top. And you can see you have plenty of fabric going over this outer line. So it's a very forgiving project. And so we're gonna put applique unit 1 in place first. What you wanna pay attention to the most is that you have this in place, and this little guy is gonna come right to the edge when you cut. So let's give him a little press to secure him. Again, just gently because we're going to put it on top of the Steady Betty in a moment. And now right here, this piece right in place. Perfect. So the beauty of building an applique unit is that it makes it very manageable when you're putting it onto your actual background fabric. If we were building all of these units on here, you would have like an issue of maybe putting a piece in crooked or wrong or it moves. It just is a lot easier to work in segments when you're putting it on your background fabric. I'm gonna give that another press right there so he sticks. And now our third and final unit, just like so. There we go, look how good. Just like the picture on the front. Don't you love it? An exact match. And now, easy peasy, we can turn our light pad off. I'm gonna pull my Steady Betty back over here. And I am going to iron one final press with my Steady Betty so that I know all my pieces are secure. So when I go to stitch this, I'm gonna put Sulky Tear Easy Stabilizer underneath this. And that really helps your stitches. If you don't have a stabilizer under your fabric, no matter how great your machine is, your stitches just aren't gonna turn out right. Your fabric's gonna get a little wrinkly and distorted in those feed dogs. The stabilizer stabilizes everything. And that Sulky Tear Easy Stabilizer, that's what I used right here. It tears away so beautifully. I love it. I'll show you in just a second. So now let's talk stitch tips. So you have everything ironed on in place. In your pattern, you're gonna reference your thread colors and your stitch order from this little guide. So it's gonna tell you what color to stitch red, what colors to stitch your gray, and it's gonna tell you the order to do so. And you can reference again what pieces are what by looking at your placement guide, or really just looking at the picture. You can see red goes here. Okay, so any stitch tips I need to share? Just a few. I mentioned it while I was ironing this on. You want to take your stitch bite in to a pretty small size when you get down to this point. Or if you wanted to, you could even do a straight stitch, like a little straight line right here. You just want to be careful basically not to shred this piece because it is so small. Another area where you're going to take your stitch size down is this little accent piece over here on your second unit. You're going to want to take your bite in down to a smaller size. You won't have to go as small as you do over here, but still be cognizant of that and take it down pretty small. This one you can do the normal size as all your other pieces. Julie stitched this one with a 2x2 on her Janome, or the one on the pattern cutter, excuse me, she did with a 2x2 everywhere. And then of course took it down to a smaller size in a few spots. On the embroidery machine, I do a 2.5 by 2.5. So it's a personal preference when you're picking out your stitch sizes, but you want to make sure that you're, you leave fabric between your stitches, right? You don't want them overlapping. I love how these look so just perfect. Makes me really happy. Another area where you're going to want to take your stitch bite in down would be right here along this gray hook and this gray hook. You want to take them down. On this one, you don't really have to. It just depends on how big of a bite you are doing in general. But this one, we were able to keep it at the same size as the others. And then when you are stitching, this part right here is going to get into your seam allowance. So technically, you do not need to stitch it because this will be sewn into your seam. And then, of course, on the bottom and the right edge of this ornament, that's going to go in the seam, so you don't need to stitch it either. So that's it. This is a very quick stitch on this block. And then next month is what? I forgot. Oh yes, the stockings with Rickrack, which is a really fun one to do. Oh, but before we left, I mentioned the stabilizer. I want to show you how great it is to peel this away. It truly tears like a dream. And then look, I can go right up to my stitches and have no issue whatsoever. And just tear it away. When you want to tear it from behind the actual applique, just very gently give yourself a little tear in that stabilizer with, say, the end of your scissors, and then just start tearing as well. And again, it tears away so nicely. I mean, you have to sit here for a second, you know, and stitch it. I mean, and tear it, but it's not hard to do. Do this part while you're watching maybe more YouTube tutorials or you can watch some of our chit chats while you just sit and tear away the stabilizer. It's a very easy project to do. So you can see this is where I tore my stitches away, right? Or not my stitches, I tore my stabilizer away. Let's look at our stitches on the front, right there. Perfect, not distorted at all. So it's a really nice stabilizer. I love it. It's the Sulky Tear Easy stabilizer. And I'm weird, I kind of store mine with the stabilizer on it until I trim them all. That's just a weird thing. But I know in the pattern we recommend trimming it all and having it ready to go. But yeah, everybody has a personal preference and that's mine. So I think that that is it in our tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope that you're enjoying the Christmas Lane block of the month. If you're watching this and you're not a member yet, don't hesitate to join. It's a really fun block of the month. You get one manageable piece of your quilt in the mail every month, and it comes in a super cute green plaid box with little polka dotted scallop across the top. It's just really fun to open. And you get a candy cane. You get a fun candy cane every month in there. As long as they don't run out of candy canes in the world, we'll have candy canes in the boxes. So as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at stitchesoflovequilting.com. Click on support and you can get to us from there. And I think that's it for today. Happy stitching, and I'll see you next month for Block 3 tutorial.